Exactly.
Tarakitarai, he aki ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hovu, tihe meriora. We thus affirm today that we as councillors will work together to serve the citizens of Selwyn District, to always use our gifts of understanding, courage, common sense, wisdom and integrity in all our discussions, dealings and decisions so that we may solve problems effectively. May we always recognise each other's values and opinions, be fair-minded and ready to listen to each other's point of view. In our dealings with each other, let us always be open to the truth of others and ready to seek agreement, slow to take offence and always prepared to forgive. May we always work to enhance the well-being of Selwyn District and its communities. We're all present for today's meeting. There's no apologies for having to leave or do anything different today. There's been no extraordinary business identified, David, nothing to you? Great. Any conflicts of interest are captured on the register? So plan change 80. This is number 9, page 30 of today's agenda, also identified by Nicole and Malcolm. Thank you. No, that's highlighting the conflict. Yep, thank you, Patty.
Yes, Phil? That's a question about those conflicts of interest. Those public plan change meetings are public. But so no, so the district plan meetings that you have been attending that you're disqualifying yourself on are they public? They're public meetings.
Yes.
I'm just wondering why the conflicts of interest need to be done for public meetings that were public, but anyone could have been there to hear the information anyway.
Because in this meeting, there has to be a decision maker on a parallel process to something that where they're already a decision maker in another room.
But aren't they two separate processes where the district plan decisions are related to this stuff here, and the plan change decisions are based on this stuff over here? I'm just seeking clarification.
Yeah. So it's up to each individual to determine what their own conflicts look like.
Sure.
Yeah. And in this case, it's felt that because of the decisions that they have had to make, and perhaps the information that they've been privy to through those other decision-making processes, that it's appropriate for them to also make decisions in this space too. So if we wanted to delve into that deeper, we could do that. But for this meeting, the three individual councillors have all identified they have their conflict, and so we will respect that decision of theirs. So for that item, which is in public today, the three of you will step away from the table as well. Yep, and taking part in the discussion or decision. The confirmation public forum, there's none today. Confirmation of minutes. These are on page 5 of today's agenda. Mover and seconder. Thanks, Malcolm and Bob. Discussion, Nicole.
I thought I took a note, but I think where it says we came back into the chambers is in the wrong spot. Page 9.
Page 9 is under number 7. It says you came back into the room after number 7, and you probably came back in the room after all of the designation decisions were done.
Yeah.
It should be noted after item 9 rather than after item 7, so we can change that. Thank you. Any further changes for those minutes? Those in favour that it be recorded as a true and accurate record say aye. Aye. Anyone against? There it carries. There's the action list, which picks up things from that meeting as well. So we've got the flooding Tamutu, which we're expecting a report in April. Community Centres Alton Libraries Network Plan in March, and report on Selwyn art licences in April. So that captures everything from that meeting. Okay. Then we come to the Chief Executive's report. It's on page 14, and Before David, I hand to you, just acknowledge the states that many councils around New Zealand find themselves in as a result of flooding and cyclones in the past few weeks. It's been a very trying time for not only those councils, but the communities that they serve, and trying to work in a multi-agency approach to respond to immediate needs and to keep people safe, as well as thinking through preparations for medium and long-term resilience for those communities is obviously very difficult and trying. As a community, many of us have gone through what earthquake uncertainty looks like and what the rebuild after that looked like as well. And I know that many in that community have expressed their concern for those up north and have given generously to support those communities. I want to thank particularly Phil for your work in helping us work with Selwyn Sounds and connecting the organisers of the Selwyn Sounds. Big up to them for being able to collect at the gates, and then the generous support of our community that gave at that event to connect and give. So well done, Phil. And thanks to those councillors, Elizabeth and Malcolm, you were there as well, and our staff and our response teams that were there too. That was excellent. I have been in touch with Rahit, saw her last week, the Mayor of Gisborne, to think about how we continue to support them and just to hear how she's doing there. There'll be an update about rural and provincial soon, and I'll talk more about it there, but there's obviously a lot of difficult things still to be done in that space. I have also connected each school in Selwyn with a school up in Gisborne, and just suggested that if they are thinking about how they would like to focus some of their work as a school or concern as a school and with their students, that they might want to connect with a particular school there as well. So there's been real community buy-in to thinking about how Selwyn supports Gisborne Tairāwhiti. The report that David's got in front of us includes a few points that councillors will feed into, including about rural and provincial in the last week. And lastly from me before I hand to David is our professional development and thinking about what we do and train as councillors. I know some of you have got some external stuff coming up around the Planning Institute. The Institute of Directors also has their conference coming up soon. Arcona, the LGNZ professional development platform is free for us to use at the moment, and I would encourage you to get online and have a look at those. There's some really good short courses that can be done and completed. Some stuff that covers legislation right through to thinking about what our role is, and also our mental health, and some online things as well. So while that is free for us as a council, I'd just encourage each councillor to have a look and see if there is value in that, so we can make an informed decision about continuing with that or not when the time comes and the free trial runs out. And just note that they have sent this morning an email to us all which looks at learning and development opportunities within local government, the use of social media, and then some wellbeing workshops. They're providing free counselling, is also made available through LGNZ to all elected members should we wish. So if you want to, please make yourselves aware of that. David, I'll hand to you, and if you'd like to highlight things in your report, thank you.
Thank you. Back on again. My report is a mixture of machinery motions and some public information. So starting firstly, Canterbury Environment Canterbury Biodiversity Advisory Group is a letter attached to the report on page 19, backgrounding the working of that group. That letter notes that Councillor Mugford was in the last term of council our representative, and my recommendation is that Councillor Mugford be retained as our representative. And recommendation B today. Similarly, Summit Road Protection. In December, as I've noted in my report, we resolved to appoint Councillor Reid on the Summit Road Authority, Councillor Miller on the Society. Conversation between those two, and it's around continuity, and the suggestion is that Councillor Miller be appointed our representative, and that is recommendation C, Mr. Mayor. A note for public information, submissions on the Castle Hill Village reserves can be made up until the 17th of March, which is Friday week, and we are receiving good numbers of submissions coming through. We had the opportunity to host the Mayor and Chief Executive and senior people from Honiara City Council and Solomons and Suva City Council in Fiji a couple of weeks back, and that's part of New Zealand's Pacific TA program. Very good learning experience on both sides, and we acknowledge also two of our staff members, Jenny Bowden and James Richmond, who have in one case taken the opportunity to go to Honiara, and in the other case will hopefully be going fairly shortly, just to share information on a two-way matter. Mayor has talked about Gisborne and our relationship with the cyclone recovery. Item 6, Local Government New Zealand Rural and Provincial Meeting, quarterly meeting held in Wellington last Thursday and Friday, attended by councillors Glidden, Dean, Miller, the Mayor and myself. I just want to pause and acknowledge our Mayor, who did an amazing job chairing that meeting for 2 days. That was really impressive what you did. The 2 days opened up with an overview of the cyclone impact and potential recovery, and everybody acknowledging that this is a very, very long journey. Talked about flood protection co-investment, tiny houses. The Minister of Local Government was in residence as well for a Q&A session, as well as an overview. Talked about, again, disaster recovery processes. And I captured a comment which I thought really summed up where the sector is at the moment. Comment was, do we have the capacity within our organisations and within ourselves to deal with what's on the horizon? So it's not only a reflection of what's going through in terms of the cyclone recovery, but just the pressures that are being placed on our sector at the moment as a result of additional legislation coming through, and obviously in our case, growth as well. So, Mr. Mayor, what I want to do is not hold the limelight on rural and provincial, but rather offer the opportunity to those councillors who were present just to share their observations, and maybe opportunity to do that now.
Right, thank you. Grant, would you like to add anything to that?
You ask the question, you get the answer. On the positive side, certainly there was some positive reinforcement of the role that local government can provide in managing disasters, and particularly giving newer members of local government some heads up and some tools to see what you should do and what you could do in these disaster spaces, which was helpful. I thought Minister McAnulty was worth hearing. He particularly about his views on what Three Waters might look like under a reset, which is not clear exactly yet, but is hopefully going to come to us in the near future. But really, I guess I question the cost effectiveness of us continuing to send us up there in some respects, because it, unless the agenda is worthwhile and compelling, to me, it's probably a spending of ratepayers' money that could be better spent elsewhere.
So I wrote down some notes too, David, that we're not alone, that no one is coming, and that it's our responsibility, but that we're not alone. These councils, and of course led through Sam and by Sam, we're very lucky to have you at our table as well as that. The cost of disaster is going to be much more than we all think, and it is going to have an effect. But I echo what Grant was saying about McAnulty, and the thing I picked up from him is going to be more like 3 weeks than 3 months. But if we get some idea about what the Three Waters reset is going to look like.
Yeah, sort of touching on the same stuff. I think the most thing I wrote down here is about creating resilience in our people when disasters actually happen. And the long-term ramifications of the damage done up north is going to be ongoing for quite many years, especially for agriculture and horticulture. You're going to be I think 2 to 7 year rebuild for a lot of those businesses, which is quite alarming for them and also for the food production in our country. Yeah, I was pretty keen to look at some information from Greater Wellington Council, and they have put together a flood protection co-investment plan and some really interesting information on that. But I think the most interesting thing to me on that was that Selwyn was missing completely from that plan. So I'm putting a few questions forward as to why we're missing from that, considering we are a flood-prone district. So that's me.
Great, thanks, Lydia. Yeah, it worked. The last piece, the flooding work is Graham Campbell and John Hutchings, so the Basil Chamberlain in the Environment Canterbury have been a key part of thinking about the flooding work, because we tried to get, at the moment they're looking at plus side of $250 million as the initial investment, but ongoing $200 million a year is what's required for the government to co-invest with local government in the protection of rivers. And there's a 10+ fold return if you protect the stuff rather than having to rebuild it. And there are a couple of examples given at the meeting where Westport didn't make the investment and now needs to fund a whole lot of work afterwards, compared to a town that had spent 10 million and now didn't need to spend 100 million because of the extra protection that had been put in place. So thank you for the updates on that meeting. David?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, councillors. Item 7, just a reminder, the Future Growth Programme, Hui Mai, is open for consultation at the moment. As of Monday afternoon of this week, there are over 4,000 submissions received already, and we acknowledge that feedback is going to be used to inform plans about transport infrastructure and urban planning, which will then go out to the public for further consultation towards the end of this year. Item number 8 is acknowledging work that the Enabling Services Committee will be doing in terms of property, and this is in response to those councillors who have talked about property identification and investment coming ahead of us in the next few months, something that I've been doing previously. Note recent conversation around community housing and whether there are any opportunities there. And the final item is just an update to the delegations manual. So, Mr. Mayor, happy to answer any questions on anything in that report.
Great, thank you. And David, there's also a note the staff have done an excellent job over the last month in supporting our submissions to the RM reform space. George Sariak led that work and around the Three Waters submission as well, Murray England, for the work that he did there. So thank you for what staff have done there. Shane.
Tēnā rau koutou. E te whai tu nei tēnā koe, e nau mana whenua tēnā koe. E te rauranga tina, a maa, a kaimahi, a uhi o rikiri, kai kauni nira, tēnā koutou. Kia ora, Sam. I just had a question perhaps for yourself, Dave, around the external or internal support from our volunteers and communities for our flood-stricken communities, Te Tairāwhiti. Are there any other areas from a professional level within council that we are supporting further north as well? And secondly, and it probably ties point 4 and point 8 together with the visit from our Te Moana councils from the islands. As we all know, a lot of the workforce here in our community from the islands, some of the time they struggle with getting housing, which therefore affects employment with some of our local larger businesses, especially in the farming. Was there any discussion around housing and support of that, and whether the councils from the islands had received any feedback with the lack thereof?
Dealing with your first question, so at one stage we had up to 17 staff and volunteers spread amongst Auckland, Gisborne and Hawke's Bay. We, the local government CEs, are in constant touch with each other in terms of who is looking for support, and our building people have reached out as well to that council. So the second question was in respect to
local workforce from the islands. Often struggle to get housing here locally, which they're supporting local businesses.
we didn't go down that line. Yeah, they were here basically looking at facility development, management, operation, first and foremost, and governance arrangements secondly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sophie.
Can I, yeah, so mine's not actually a question, it's just an addition to note that today is International Women's Day. And the theme of the year is, I think it's embrace equity around, and that's not just about advancing women's issues or anything, it's around everyone equity. So I just thought I'd say that. And I reckon as far as council goes, we're not doing too badly. We now have 50-50 female, male around the table. We've got women in traditionally male jobs. We've got men in traditionally female jobs. So yeah, there's always plenty to go, but just a note that it's a good day to be a woman.
Thanks for highlighting, Sophie. Great. Grant.
You win today, Sophie. MRT page 7, I still think it's very short-sighted that it stops at Belfast and Hornby. I think if we're building a future-focused network, you should build for the future, not build for the current, and I think we're being sold short.
Thanks, Grant. Those that are on the GCP and previously will know the plans is for it to continue to both Rolleston and Rangiora. And at the moment, it's not going to visit it. It will make it to Belfast and Hornby. The initial stages of Papanui to Riccarton route. And if proven successful there, then the extensions will be made further. But if it can't be run successfully between Papanui and Riccarton through the centre of the city, then the density of living and the cost of the infrastructure won't make sense to go any further for the level of return. So we'll need to come up with something else if the MRT won't function in that space. Encourage everyone to jump on the Huahu My website with their feedback, and those in your community, in our community, or in your local community, to give that feedback as well. We'll turn up to the events that are being held here. The two MRT options at the moment are light rail or buses that look like light rail but aren't confined to the track, and the biggest difference being you spend a lot of money up front on putting the track in the ground, and that's extra capital. Equally, if you do that, you create a whole heap of certainty for development of land around the track, which then lifts the amount of people that can use the infrastructure once it's put in place. So around MRT, that's probably the big thing to think about, the difference between those two, and which are we willing to invest in early to make it happen. And the other is the spatial plan work and thinking about where and how we're going to live, particularly in Selwyn, across Rolleston, Prebbleton and Lincoln as we move forward. But you're right, Grant, it does need to come out further. Public transport in Selwyn needs to be improved, and we'll continue to press that with Environment Canterbury outside of the MRT conversation as well, to get the links between all of our small towns, which at the moment have no public transport option, and we rely on people getting in their own vehicle and travelling in a car, usually by themselves, to the next destination. Elizabeth.
Hi, there's a large full run advertisement in the paper, which has got Te Atia on one side of it and then a high story housing complex next to it. There's not really any written detail with it, but it looks to be the same picture they're using for the GCP submission type topics. Just wondering who put that advert in and what was the point of it? It's got, there's nothing, there's no invitation to the public, there's not really any information going with that. And is that part of the advertising campaign to get people to come along to the events to have their say?
We'll get someone to follow up with you on the detail of that, but it sounds like one of the images that was used to promote Huahu Mai. Yes. That will get someone to follow up.
Which paper are you talking about?
Yeah, that's what I'm just
Selwyn Times,
Today,
today.
no, came out, I think must have been last week's one.
Okay, we'll follow up with you after
Yeah.
the meeting.
I just saw it in the paper and
Good call.
on the table.
And talking about events, there's one on at TRRT tonight for the workshop, stakeholder workshop thing. I think it's from about 5 o'clock.
Great, thanks, Nicole. So we received the chief executive's report, agreed to the appointment of Grant to the respective groups and approved the additions and alterations to the delegations manual. Move Shane, seconded Nicole. All those in favour say aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. Thank you. Tab 8 is page 22. It's approval to grant an easement. So moved. Moved Malcolm, seconded Grant. Is there any discussion on this matter? Deborah.
I noticed that there's some history with regards to this particular installation of a pipeline that the council was unaware that it actually existed. Is that my reading of the document? And if that's the case, do we have a policy or is this the only one that we're going to actually have to deal with in this matter? Or is there a council policy around this with regards to if other sites are actually found to have unlawful easements or unlawful connections?
Thanks, Deborah. Rob, welcome along to the meeting. I'll end for you.
This is a process matter, administration process under the Reserves Act, Section 48. They can't be delegated to officers or a committee, so that's why it comes to full council. There is pressure sometimes on developers in relation to installation of services, and sometimes we don't have the consent from council for the services. Some of them have gone into the town. Mostly we're happy with the process because they don't affect public rights over the land, because normally they're under the land. But yes, this is just mopping up after the event on some occasions, and it's just purely the administrative process.
Thank you. Any further questions? Then moved and seconded. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. Thanks, Rob. The next item, we have 3 councillors stepping away from the table. It's plan change 80, tab 9, page 31. A recommendation that we accept the independent commissioner's report, approve for public notification, delegate the head of strategy and policies to take any necessary steps to make it, to give it effect, and make it operative at the conclusion of the appeal period if no appeals are filed. Move and seconder. Sophie, thank you. Grant, thanks. Is there any conversation on this matter? Perhaps.
I raised with Mr. England the issue of water supply, which is in the Commissioner's decision around being adequate water in that space. One of the suggestions was that potentially water could be changed from the applicant's other developments and transferred to this development. I was of the understanding that the Selwyn District Council, as a policy, would require water consents to be transferred to it along when the changes of zoning was made. My understanding from the water services team is that that is the general rule of thumb, but in cases where there's excess supply, or that remains with the developer. So long story short, it seems like the onus is on the applicant to provide adequate water to the subdivision when it's required. So I just think we need to keep that in mind when the time comes.
Yeah, I'm happy to move it. I'm just wondering if we can. Are there going to be any issues around works that we already have planned in that area as far as roadworks and all that sort of thing? Is it going to require existing plans to be shifted, and then what sort of movement in terms of budgets and timeframes is that going to impact, please?
So Jess, welcome along to the meeting, and I'll hand to you.
Good afternoon. We'll answer that question. I also wanted to clarify there's an error in section 3 of my report where it says that the hours of operation are limited restricted between 10 PM and 7 PM. It should be 7 AM as per the Commissioner's recommendation. So just change that P to an A. In regards to roading and other upgrades, specific conditions have been added to the proposed amendments to the operative plan, ensuring that no development can happen on the site until the necessary roading and other upgrades have been undertaken, because some of the basis for the approval, with it being okay from a traffic perspective, is that the network is already free flowing as much as it can be before that happens. So there's a similar restriction placed on the Plan Change 66 site, which is yet to be developed but is currently in the operative plan, making sure that upgrades to Hoskins Road are undertaken before development can happen on the site. So those matters have been considered. Thanks.
Thank you, Jess. Elizabeth.
Hi. I really like the landscaping design that's been put forward. Will that landscaping be done at an early time before the businesses take on that space?
The conditions with the subdivision consent being granted is usually that the landscaping is in place before activities can be undertaken on the site. So far as it wouldn't interfere, I guess, with the buildings within individual sites, usually the landscaping would be undertaken first. I can double check the terminology used in the rules to confirm if we're requiring landscaping to be undertaken before development on the site. Historically in the Business 2A zone, that has been the case, but I will confirm.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Been moved and seconded. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Anyone against? Carried. Thank you. Thanks, Jessica. Next we have item 10.11, page 156. If we get the others to come back into the room. So this is the proposal to redevelop Foster Park in the vicinity of the dwelling at 1092 Golds Road, Ralston. Recommendation that the council approves the removal, disposal or demolition of the dwelling and in the vicinity 1092 Golds Road in accordance with council's land sale policy. Bianca, Rob, Phil, welcome to the meeting. I'll hand the floor to you if you'd like to take us through the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Tēnā koutou katoa. This report concerns the council and house at 1092 Golds Road, located at Foster Park in Rolleston. The report is seeking council's approval under its land sale policy to remove, dispose of or demolish the house. If council chooses today to adopt the recommendation as tabled, then it is proposed that officers of council will proceed with plans to redevelop the site where the house currently sits as a passive recreation space, complementary to the balance of Foster Park, which has become one of Selwyn's premier sporting and recreation hubs. The proposal is noted as option D in the report, with the corresponding plan included as Appendix B. The redevelopment is considered by officers to be the most appropriate option for the community and Foster Park. We're happy to take any questions that councillors may have. Nō reira, tēnā koutou katoa.
Thanks, Bianca. Are there any questions of the report? Moved, Malcolm, seconded.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, got beat touch now. Great. Any questions or comments? All those in favour say aye. Aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. Thank you. Next we have item 11, page 175. It's register of documents signed and sealed. Mover and seconder. Shane and Malcolm. Any questions on these?
Yep.
Sophie.
I'm curious about the item around Ladbrokes Hall adverse positioning claim application. What's that? Thank you.
Yeah, see, do you know the answer?
No. Oh. Well done. Sorry, where did the question come from? That's okay. So Ladbrokes Hall, I can't remember what the circumstances were in which we came across this, but I think it was to do with how the water is supplied to the whole building. And we realised that the record of title was showing in the name of, I believe, the former trustees of the War Memorial Hall. Yeah. However, councillors, I mean, for all intents and purposes, acting as the owner for all of this time, and we just assumed that we were owners on title, so we put forward an adverse possession claim to have council's name put on the title instead. Yeah, that's the extent of it, really.
It happens on a few of the halls. Green Park was another one case where it was owned by two members of the community who donated it to the community, and then council assumed control, rated for it, etc. So acts of ownership maintained it. So it's just to perfect the title in council's name.
Thank you, Bob.
Yeah, the unformed roads in Colgate, have there been anyone else put any in for use of land as of yet?
Yes, I believe there has. I think there's been about 3 or 4 licenses that have been put in place on that one. We can send you a list through.
That would be good, thank you.
Thank you. That was moving seconded. We need someone for those. Signed and sealed. Yeah, right. All those in favour say aye. Against? Declare carried. Thank you. Resolution to exclude the public. Moved Nicole, seconded Lydia. Any discussion? All those in favour say aye. Aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. And we'll just remain in our seats and end the public part of this meeting.